Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on moving beyond the population schedule of the U.S. Federal Census. My name is Ginevra Morse, Vice President of Education and Programming at American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society. I will be your moderator for today's program. American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history and are pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. I also want to note that we are broadcasting from our homes to your home with various limitations and distractions. We apologize in advance if there are any interruptions from our end, and we thank you for your patience. Even if we were to lose connection, you will still have access to a full recording of this presentation on our website, as well as our YouTube channel. Our presenter today is Lindsay Fulton, Vice President of Research and Library Services. Lindsay joined American Ancestors in 2012, first as a member of the Research Services team and then as a genealogist in the library. In addition to helping constituents with their research, Lindsay has also authored Portable Genealogists on the topics of applying to lineage societies, the United States Federal Census 1790 to 1840, and the United States Federal Census 1850 to 1940. She is a frequent contributor to the NEHGS blog Vita Brevis and has appeared as a guest on the Extreme Genes radio program. So now, of course, the U.S. Federal Census is one of the first resources family historians check to find their ancestors. What many don't realize, however, is that there is much more to the Federal Census than just those population schedules that we're accustomed to viewing. Today, Lindsay will review just some of the other schedules that can be helpful for family historians, how to find these non-population schedules, and how to leverage them in your family history research. At any point during the presentation, feel free to type your question into the panel to the right of your screen. We'll address those at the end. There is a syllabus for this session that can be purchased from our online bookstore. You'll find a link to this downloadable PDF in your reminder emails, as well as in your follow-up email that I'll be sending out after today's live broadcast. And we are, as I mentioned, recording this event, and starting tomorrow, you can freely go back and review any of the content from the presentation on our website, as well as our YouTube channel. So if you missed something on today's first listen, don't worry, you can always go back and review the presentation later. All right, so without further ado, I will turn things over to Lindsay.
Thank you, Ginevra. Welcome, everyone. Today, we are going to be talking about my favorite subject, the United States Federal Census. And I love the census because it's really the only record collection that we have that records all of the people living in the United States. So it's not just, the wealthy people who can buy property or have a probate record. It's everyone that's living in the United States. So you can find who you're looking for most often by using the federal census. And the other thing that I really like about it is that it has way more to it than just the population schedule. So I think everyone starts with the census. When they're first starting their family history journey, they usually start there and then move on to and then they usually move very quickly off onto some other records. But really, the census has so many secrets and has so many hidden gems, and that's why I love talking about the federal census. So just as an overview, and what I would like you to understand is that the federal census was created, it's authorized by Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution. And the point of the census is to make an accurate count of all people living in the United States. And that's for representative purposes. That's the whole point of why we have this. It wasn't created for genealogists as much as we think it was. And because this is created for representative purposes, really all they care about is, you'd think, counting people. But there's so many more questions on the census, right? Where are your parents born? were you, when did you immigrate to the country, depending on what census year we're talking about. And the reason they're asking those questions is to drive policy. So the legislative branch, the executive branch, they're trying to drive policy. They need numbers to back up why they want to create a program, right? So that's why they're asking those questions on the federal census. And that's why we're taking some of these non-population schedules as well. So going back, so the population schedule is what we're looking at most often, right? That's the thing that we look at many times a day. So the first enumeration is done in 1790. The last one we have available to us is in 1940. We just took a census in 2020. The next census to become available is going to be on the 1st of April in 2022. We are approaching it at rapid speed, and that will be the 1950 census. The other thing to remember that the jurisdiction of the federal census started under the State Department, and now it's part of the U.S. Census Bureau. That's just, so that's the census in general, but also talking about the population schedule. The special censuses and the non-population schedules are what we're going to talk about today. And as you can see from this screen, there are many of them that are available to be searched. We're going to talk about the first 6 there. So today we're going to talk about the agricultural schedules, the defective, dependent, and delinquent classes, the industry and manufacturing schedules, mortality schedules, and slave schedules, and social statistics schedules. So many censuses to go over. We are not going to cover the business census, which is done in 1935. We're not going to do the Union veterans and widows schedule, which was done in 1890. It's the one census that we have from 1890 that survived. I'm not going to talk about Indian census rolls. That could be its own class on its own. And then there's several others that I'm not going to go over today just because we don't have enough time. But I wanted to go over those first 6 because really it provides great genealogical information, and they're fairly widely available. So the first one we're going to go over is the agricultural schedule. And this is a fun one because, many of our ancestors at one point in time probably owned a farm. So you can find them on, or they worked on a farm, so you can find them on one of these particular schedules. It's taken in 1850, 1860, 70, 80, and 1885. The 1885 schedule is a territorial census, so that's not done for every state, but the others would have been done for all of the states that participated in that particular census schedule. We get the name of the farmer and some statistics about livestock, and you can find them on, for the most part, you can find some of them on Ancestry.com and Family Search. They can be available in other places though, so always remember that. They can be available on local, like historical societies, at your state library or archive. Most states took special censuses, but they're not all online. And if you want to know more about where everything is and how to get a hold of it, that is something that's included on the syllabus that Ginevra was mentioning earlier today for all 50 states. Availability and then where to find it. Okay, so something to also keep in mind, not everything's online, and also not every farm is included. You have to hit a certain threshold in terms of the value of the property. So it's not just a garden that you might have had off to the side. This needs to be a significant farm. So the first schedules that they're taking in 1850 and 1860, the requirement was for the farm to be valued over $100. They're also asking questions about the name of the farmer, and that can be also the owner of the farm or the manager of the farm. We get information about acreage, so what's been improved and what's not been improved. We know about the livestock that's present on the farm, and then we get information about it by breed. So is it, chickens, cows, horses, all of that's included. We get a count of the agricultural goods produced in the previous year, and then a cash value of the farm. all of this information is given to the census taker by the farmer. So the cash value of the farm, that's what the farmer has decided. So in some cases, they may have inflated the price of their farm if they wanted to for some particular reason, or they may have fibbed about it, and it might be worth more than it actually is on paper. Remember, they're reporting to the government, so sometimes folks don't like to be totally upfront about everything that's going on in their business. So that's what's happening from 1850 to 1860. Just with the population schedules, so you know how when you look at a population schedule, if you looked at the 1790s schedule, for example, there's just some hash marks. You know that there's males and females living in a household, and that's pretty much it. But as time goes on, they're asking more and more questions. So the same is true for the agricultural schedules. Is that in 1850 and 1860, they're asking some questions. By 1870 and 1880, they're asking even more questions. They want to know all of the crops that are being being planted on that particular acreage. They want to know an inventory of the poultry and the number of eggs that are produced by 1880. Also, farms that are included on the 1870 and 1880 schedule, those are farms that are worth over $500. So again, if your ancestors are going to be included on this, they need to have a sizable farm to be enumerated in this particular schedule. And then when we do territorial schedules, so those were done in 1885 for Colorado, Florida, Nebraska, New Mexico, and then the Dakota territories, so North and South Dakota. They're asking even more questions. So again, it's $500, but they're asking about hired labor. They want to know about an inventory of livestock, both by breed and by product. And they want a count of the agricultural goods produced in the previous year. They're even asking about forests. So if you cut down trees, they want to know about that too. There's a whole bunch of questions that they're asking in 1885. And I just wanted to show you how many questions that they're asking. So this next schedule is just to show you a bird's eye view of, so this would have been for just a handful of farmers. So this is 100 questions that they would have asked if your ancestor was included on this 1885 agricultural schedule. So I'm going to zoom in a little to show you an example, because I know you can't read this. So this is the 1885 agricultural schedule from Billings County, North Dakota. And what I want you to notice is always look at the heading of a particular census. So you see how it says Schedule 2? So Schedule 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 is always referring to a non-population schedule. So Schedule 1 is always the population schedule. And you'll notice that now when you look at population schedules, you'll say, oh, that's what they mean by Schedule 1. It's because that's the first part of the census that they're taking. Schedule 2 is the second part. And in this case, it's going to be agriculture. So if we wanted to just look at an example here, like Peter J. Book, he has $1,000 worth of land and farm. He has $125 worth of farming equipment. He has $250 worth of livestock, $1,000 in repairs that he did over the previous year. He paid $100 in wages, and he hired per week 10 individuals. So there's a whole bunch of information about this particular Peter, but also there's guys that are working on the farm too. And we know that from this particular answer. So that's something else to keep in mind, is that if your ancestor's living in Billings County, North Dakota, and they're a hired hand on a farm, they might be one of these 10 people that's included in this particular enumeration. So again, there's always an additional element to finding someone on this particular census record. Now, I know you're all wondering, what states are included. So this is something that I'm going to do for each of the 6 schedules. This is just the online images. So these others, so in green are the states where there's online images. So something at Family Search or at Ancestry.com, or maybe at one of the local historical societies, they might have digitized those records. If your state is not green on here and it's gray, that doesn't mean that those schedules don't exist. They're just not currently online. They might be in microfilm, they might be at a local historical society. And again, that stuff that all of that is included on the syllabus if you want to know specifically where everything is. But these green states, I can say, have online images available to you. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind as we're going through this particular, these six schedules, is this searchable? So I just showed you all those green states, right, that have digital images available. Well, are they searchable images? And that's a very key element to doing census research, especially non-population schedule census research. So Peter Book was the guy that we found, was the example that I showed you previously, right? He was the guy that had the $1,000 worth of land and whatnot. So I just want to show to you what happens when you search on Ancestry.com, for example. This is just for example. This is their collection of U.S. selected federal census non-population schedules. So this is something where he should be included in this, right? If he had the farm in 1880, which you'd assume in 1885 he does. So in 1880, he probably should be included on this. So we're looking in Billings County, North Dakota. We're searching for him using this particular search field, and we're telling it to look exactly in Billings County because that's where we want to find him. So when we do that search, we get nothing. There is no good match for that particular search. So as you can see, that's not something that they made searchable. So what we need to do then is we need to find them on the population schedule. So here we are looking at Peter Book. Again, we're going to select looking in Billings County. This is the territorial census for North Dakota. We know that he's included in here. So now we're going to just get to that page by finding him in the population schedule. And this is something that you should do for your ancestors too. You find them in the population schedule first, and then you can move on to those non-population schedules. So when we do this particular search, we find Peter living with his wife, Minnie, and Lucy, his daughter. But I will always suggest that you should look at the original image. You don't want to just look at what's been transcribed by the folks at Ancestry.com or whatever index you're looking at, or transcription you're looking at. You want to look at that original image. So we go to View. And when we do that, we find him on the population schedule. Again, Schedule 1 is our population schedule. You'll notice down here that it's image 16 of 33. So there's 33 images that are in the county, that are in Billings County. And this is our Peter, and all of this looks good, right? So Peter, all we knew when we're comparing him to the gentleman that we found on the agricultural schedule, all we know is that he owns a lot of stuff. And this is kind of matching up with that. So he's a mason and builder. So okay, that kind of jives with what we found. So this is probably our person. So if this was your ancestor and you wanted to see if he was on the agricultural schedule, so if we're doing it the other way around, you need to think about how the schedule is created. So how each of these schedules are created, how the census is taken. And really the important thing to remember to know is that it's done by a person, that a person is coming to the door and asking particular questions. So the enumerator is a federal employee. They're given a specific region or district that they're going to cover, they're going to canvass. They don't ask for proof of the answer for any of the questions that they're asking. They don't ask for spelling. They don't have a translator. But they are told to do things in a very specific order. So they're even told, in some cases, how to walk down the street. So they're given a set of instructions. They were told, you need to ask these questions in order. They're given an instruction manual. It's sometimes between 20 and 60 pages long. And all of the questions that they're supposed to ask are given in that particular manual. And they're asking them in order. So Schedule 1, the population schedule, are the first questions they're going to ask. So they go through that with Peter Book, for example. So they ask Peter, what's your name? Where are you from? Where were you born? How old are you? Who lives here? What do you do for a living? Oh, you're a mason builder. Do you have a farm? And they would have been at the front door, so they could have looked around and said, hey, what about that farm over there? So they would have asked particular questions afterwards about that. So they would have written everything down for Schedule 1. And once they got to the point where they knew, oh, so this guy owns stuff, now we have to go to Schedule 2 to ask him all those questions about the farm and the farm equipment and all of that. So then it's going to be recorded in Schedule 2 in the same order as Schedule 1. So when we look at the bottom, those images, so we need to keep paging forward until we get to Schedule 2. So we go to image 26, we get to Schedule 2, and that's where we find Peter J. Book. So always, 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 whenever you can see down here that there is more than one image, you have to browse. So I encourage you with all of my might to browse as much as you can. Because there can be more included in that particular record. So there could be so if you're looking at Schedule 1, there could be Schedule 2, 3, 4, 5 that are all included on that digital roll. So it's important to look at the images that are included. Okay, so bouncing back to, the agricultural schedule, if you find someone on the agricultural schedule, that's great information, and you should be recording making notes that are of all the information that's included there, but also thinking about what other records can be found. So likely the person who's on the agricultural schedule will probably be on the industry and manufacturing schedules that we're going to talk about in a little bit. They probably would have a city directory, or be on a city directory, or maybe in a newspaper. A county history might talk about how they were one of the first folks that was, establishing the town, and they had a farm that, raised pigs. You could find land records. You could look at federal land records for a homesteader potentially, or maybe there's deeds. And then something interesting that I heard was looking specifically at the crops, because folks would come over from wherever they were coming from, whatever country they were coming from, and they might bring with them the knowledge of growing a particular crop that's not commonly grown in the United States. So that might give you a hint as to the immigrant origins of a particular individual. So if they're growing a whole lot of, radishes, and radishes were really popular in fill in the blank country, that might be able to steer you in the right direction for some immigrant records. It's really thinking outside the box, but I always like doing that. Okay, so that was agricultural schedules. Those were fun schedules. This schedule is incredibly depressing, but it gives you so much information if your ancestors included on here. This is the defective, dependent, and delinquent classes, and all of the titles and descriptions that are included in this particular class are all incredibly offensive today. But I'm just using the term that is used on the particular census. So it's taken in 1880. And the reason that it's popular in 1880 is that this was a time in American history where we were really thinking about institutionalizing individuals. So, you know, like there were orphanages, and there were almshouses, and there were, you know, schools for you know, children with learning disabilities, and there was a place they wanted to keep putting people in a certain place. So that's why this schedule is taken in 1880. This is right around the height of that particular movement. So they wanted to gather all sorts of data about these individuals. So they're asking specifically about insane individuals, so anyone with mental health, idiots. Again, this is a term that was the medically used term in 1880. It's not a term we would use today, obviously. It's for individuals that have some sort of learning disability. Then we have deaf individuals, blind individuals, paupers or indigent people, which is essentially folks who are down on their luck. We have homeless children and prisoners. So these are all of the populations that are included in this defective, dependent, and delinquent class schedule. Again, depressing schedule, but gives you a whole lot of information about your individual. So for the insane schedule, they're asking about the name of the person. They want to know where they live when they're at home, because typically these individuals are recorded in a institution, and in those cases they don't want to double count. So they want to make sure that the person is not being claimed at home versus at the institution, and double counted that way. So that's why they're asking that question. They're asking if the individual is paying for themselves or if they're a ward of the state. They ask the form of the disease, which was supposed to be given by a medical professional, because again, this is being asked of individuals who are in an institution, so there should be a medical professional available. They ask about the history of their mental issues. They ask, which is pulling at my heartstrings, but they ask if the person needs to be restrained or in seclusion, and then whether or not they've ever been institutionalized before, and if so, where. So let me show you an example of an entry for some individuals who are included on this particular census schedule. So this is in Lowell, Massachusetts. This is at the Lowell City Almshouse. So you can tell from up here that that's where the information is coming from. And again, they're asking all those questions that I said before. So like, for example, this is Electa Marshall. You know, where was she living before? She was usually from Lowell in Middlesex. You know, what's her form of illness? They're saying that she is mania. She's 36 years old, and she had been at another point in time at the Worcester Hospital. So this is stuff that you can use. So if Electa is your ancestor, you can use this information to find potentially more information about Electa. Maybe the Worcester Hospital has records available for you to examine. You know, just something to think about when you find someone on the schedule to move to a different record set. I also want to remind you about how the census is tabulated. So if you find someone, if someone shows up in your search on the defective dependent schedule, and you want to find them in the population schedule, you can do that. So you can flip-flop. So you can go back to find them on the population schedule. And the way that you do that is just by looking at where, so Electa was the person who was first enumerated in that almshouse. So you can search the population schedule for them. So this is on Family Search. So if we're looking in the 1880 United States Federal Census, you can search that way. So you can put in Electa's name, her first name and last name, and then something will come up that is the population schedule. So again, Schedule 1, living in Lowell, Massachusetts. But I meant to point out on the side of the example, and I'll show you in the next couple examples, on the side, it gives information about where the person was originally enumerated. So in this case, it said page 42, number 1. So they're referring to this 42, and then she's the first person enumerated. So that's how you can flip flop back and forth, to finding your individual on the population schedule. And the population schedule is going to give different information than what's on, some of those subsequent schedules. Okay, the next schedule is to look at what they're deeming idiots, which is folks with mental disabilities. That is the name of the person, whether or not they're residing at home, are they self-supporting, when did they notice that they have this mental disability, what is the supposed cause of it, what are their physical attributes, and if they're at a training school. And then if they are at a training school, how long or when were they discharged? So again, this would have been taken along with the population schedule. So we'll find people just kind of peppered in here. And this was an example that I wanted to choose because this particular enumerator was, they were very thorough with their examination of this particular individual. So this is from Carlisle, Massachusetts, in Middlesex County. And we can see the enumerator's note for the Spalding children. So we have William, Mary, and Lucy on the top here. But then there's also the enumerator note. And it says that the 3 Spaldings that were named above are the oldest of 6 children of Oliver and Lucy Spalding. Lucy's maiden name is Baldwin. I mean, you don't get this kind of information on a population schedule. So that's why it's really important for you to browse, forward and back to try to find your ancestors on each of these census schedules, because it might give some really great information, like a mom's maiden name. You'd never thought you'd find that in the 1880 census, but here it is. So a few other examples. So again, each of these schedules is part of that bigger schedule, the defective dependent class. So deaf individuals, the name of the person is included. Again, the residents when they're at home, because they don't want to double count. They're asking whether or not they're self-supported, the age at which the deafness occurred, supposed cause, and then also they're asking if they've ever been institutionalized. And again, this is information that they're likely gathering because they want to figure out what to do with policy and government programs to help these individuals. So here's our example of deaf individuals in Lowell, Massachusetts. We have Paul Duke here at the top. He was born deaf, and apparently the cause of that was smallpox. And that he had not been in an institution before. But in some cases, you'll find institutional information in there, just as we did with Electa, who was at the Worcester Hospital. So blind individuals, again, we're asking very similar questions to the previous 3. So the name of the person, where did they live usually, are they self-supported, when did this happen, what's the cause, and then if they've ever been institutionalized. And again, this particular census enumerator, what a lovely person. They're giving all sorts of information about how all 3 individuals became blind or had partial visual loss. And in some cases, they're very young when it happened. So this individual Thomas was only 8 years old when it happened. And then John, it happened to him when he was 42 years old. And you'll also notice that George, our third person here, he was actually a pupil at the Perkins Institute in Boston. So this might be something, where you could go to Perkins and see if there's some additional records for that individual. But there's also really detailed information about each of those people and how they became blind. They're kind of giving the full story at the bottom there. So if one of your ancestors was one of these 3 people, I mean, this is probably information you wouldn't find anywhere else. Paupers and indigent persons, again, similar questions to what they were asking before: name, residence, when they usually live at home, and how they're supported. But now they're asking some additional questions that are, well, they're asking some additional questions that might not be appropriate, but they're asking if the person is disabled, and that would include whether they're blind, deaf, insane, idiotic, again, at using the terms of the time. So there's very strong possibility that someone would be included on this particular record that would also be, so if they answered yes to, I'm having trouble hearing, then they would be on the deaf schedule. Or if they were having trouble seeing, they would be on the blind schedule in addition to this particular schedule. So they could be enumerated twice in these special schedules. They also ask if the person's been convicted of a crime, if they were born in the institution, and what other members of the family are also living there. Anyone that's done research before with individuals who were living at orphanages or almshouses or workhouses or institutions, sometimes it's very difficult to get a hold of those records because they're usually a protected population. So most of the time, state libraries and archives, they will not allow you to look at all of the records that are available. So sometimes this might be the only way of you knowing that someone ended up in one of these particular institutions. So that's another silver lining of one of these particular census schedules. So we can see this is in the Woburn Almshouse, and there's a whole bunch of people that are included in here. It gives information about what their ailments are, and then whether or not they had been in an institution before, and if they were having trouble with seeing or hearing, and that would be these tally marks here. As I was saying before, folks that are in orphanages, those are hard records to get a hold of. So this might be the only record that you have that your ancestor was living in an institution for homeless folks. And this is including the name of the person. We also get whether or not their mother and father are deceased. We have information about how they came to live there, whether or not they had been arrested. And again, they're asking those questions from the previous schedules. Are you blind, deaf, or idiotic? So the example we're giving here is from Newton in Middlesex County. Again, this is the Newton Home for Orphan and Destitute Girls. And it gives information about, you can see all of the girls that are listed here. Also, when they came to the institution is in this column here, and then the information about their parents are included. So in this case, the mother is deceased. In this case, both parents are deceased. So this is obviously very wonderful information if you are, if this is one of your ancestors and you're trying to figure out information about their parents. And then finally, prisoners. So this is the name of the person, where they live when they're not in prison, the place that they're imprisoned, whether they're a state or a federal prisoner, the cause for incarceration, and it's very important to note here that they used to incarcerate witnesses. So your ancestor might be a witness to a crime, and they would be included on this particular schedule. So it's not necessarily that they did something wrong. They might just be a witness. There's also information about whether they're working, what their offense was and their sentence, and then their date of imprisonment. So I think the example that I chose here is for just a few gentlemen, but this one for George Rudolph, it made me chuckle, but I feel also terrible for George because he was living at the State Reform middle school, and the reason that he was there was because he was a stubborn child. I mean, there's a lot to say about the institutional movement in the latter 19th century, but there's so much information in these particular schedules. You know, if your ancestor is included in them, it's a great look into some information about them. Where are they? Well, the pink or peach color are where they are online. This is one of the censuses that I noticed is widely available. It's just not available online. So it exists in many of these other gray states, mostly at state libraries and archives. That's where the originals are. So you might want to take a look there if the state is not highlighted for your particular ancestor. You know, they might be located on the local level. The other thing to think about is what other records can be found. So obviously, if there's a prisoner record, you could find some criminal or civil cases. If someone's deceased and you know the parents are deceased of the girl who you're finding in the orphanage, then there could be probate records for them. But the other thing to think about is the folks who are listed as blind or deaf. And the reason that, so if someone was injured on the job, like this newspaper article here is showing, they may be included in there because they were injured on the job. So you might get information about your ancestor that way, because it's not including information of something that just happened. I mean, it could be over time. Your ancestor just needed to be alive in 1880 to answer these questions. Okay, so that was our depressing schedule. Moving on to industry and manufacturing. It's very similar to the agricultural schedule in that it's including the name of the manufacturer and what they've got and what are they producing. There was one taken in 1810. There's one taken in 1820. The 1810 is a mess. There was no real information given to the enumerators, so we don't have a whole lot of information about, most of them didn't survive. 1820, on the other hand, that's fairly available. So that's something to keep an eye at, because I know everyone hates the 1820 schedule and 30 and 40 because it doesn't give anyone's names, but this is going to give a whole bunch of information if you can find your ancestor on that particular schedule. Then they take them more widely in 1850, 60, 70, and 80. The operations had to be valued over $500, and we can find them digitally on Ancestry and Family Search. And I'll show you later on the little map that shows you which states are included. So what are they asking? So in 1820, 1850, and 60, they're asking for the name of the manufacturer, the business and the product type, how much is invested, the quantities, the kind of power, what's the number of men and women that are employed for the company, and then what's that cost of labor. So again, your ancestor doesn't necessarily need to own the company. They might have worked at the company. So here's the 1820 census, the industry census. It's for Mercer County, Pennsylvania, for Samuel Robinson. So this is several pages of a census. So the first is full, tri-folded. It says his name, Samuel Robinson, on the front, and that he's living in Mercer County. So this was the tri-fold that I just showed you the example of here. The top portion of the census is all of the questions that they're going to ask. And then the bottom is the answers to all those questions. So in 1820, they didn't have those nice little, prefabbed censuses that were printed that they just filled out. This is all done by hand. So that's why it's so it's in different handwriting and whatnot. So these are the answers that they're giving. So the question was, what business are you in? What kind of business? And they were in rye and corn. What's the quantity? It was $300 of a bushels. What's the cost? It was $150. How many people are employed for you? 2 men. What kind of machinery do you use? There's 2 copper stills. The capital invested is $150. The annual wages is $50. The expenses is $10. The nature of the manufacturer is whiskey. And the market value is $300. There's also this lovely section that allows for comments. And the enumerator said the actual and past condition of the establishment is not good. The demand for and sale of its manufacturer, not good. Which is humorous, but I guess not for Samuel Robinson because he's has a failing business, which is not good. But wonderful information coming from the 1820 census where normally you don't get much of anything. And then if we look further on, just as I was saying before, the more the census years go on, the more information you get. So here's from Diamond Springs in El Dorado County, California. You can see how many more questions they're asking. Everything's nice and neat on this census schedule. You'll see it's census number 4, schedule 4 for this particular census year in 1870. Again, make sure that you are looking for your ancestor and browsing the images for your ancestor. So once you find them on the population schedule, then they could be on some of these subsequent schedules. And our online images here are in gray, dark gray. That's where you can find things recorded either on Ancestry, Family Search, or some of those other local historical societies that have digitized their census records. If you find someone on the industry schedule, manufacturing and industry, they could be on the agricultural schedule. It's one of those things that kind of go hand in hand. And as I was saying before, they're always on the population schedule, so make sure you're finding them there. You could also look for business records, city directories, probates, especially inventories, and then also newspaper articles. So there's more to find once you find them on one of those schedules. The mortality schedule, this is something that's mostly searchable, I've found. I don't want to say that across the board 100% of the time, but for the most part, these have been indexed. If something is available online, it's usually indexed. It includes the name of the person. They're taken in 50, 60, 70, and 80. It includes the age, race, and gender, usually the cause of death, and then the occupation of the individual. But remember, it's not just people that died in 1850 or people who died in 1860. It's the census year. So they have to die between the 1st of June of the previous year and the 31st of May of the census year, because that's what makes up all of the questions that the enumerator is asking is based on that time frame. It's not, obviously you wouldn't be able to say like who in this household is dying. It would have to be who in this household died within the previous year. So here's a quick example of Ingersoll in Midland County, Michigan. And we have examples of folks that are born in Ohio, Michigan, and New York. And then we see all, what their occupation was and then what they died of. So some had heart disease, this person died of TB, and this person died of whooping cough. So in some cases, Michigan, 1870, the death records are a little iffy at that time frame. This might be the only record of an individual dying. So as I said before, the census day matters. So you can find that at the top of every census schedule that's given. It says the census day on the top. So it's everything that happened to that previous year from that particular day. But if you forget, or if you want to just double check, I cannot say enough nice things about the census, the history website. They did a fabulous job. There's so much information. It's free. Go take a look at it. It really does give so much information about the census. And one of those things that's included is the census day. The census day is not the same as the day that the census was taken. It's not the day that the person shows up to the front door and asks the questions. The census day is, the parameters that the government had decided that we should be taking data for. So if it's June 1st, then it's all 12 months previous to June 1st that are being counted. So what's online? There's a lot online for mortality schedules. Everything in red is online. And again, like I said before, most of it is searchable, either on Ancestry or on Family Search. But I don't want to say all of it. So make sure, do an experiment or two, to see if something's searchable. Or as I said before, browse to your heart's content, because that's the best way of showing that you've done a full search. So what other records can be found? Obviously, you can look for obituaries or newspaper articles. You could look for a death record or a cemetery record. In some cases, there could be coroner or medical reports available. And then, of course, probate records. Slave schedules are taken in 1850 and 1860. So if you have enslaved ancestors, you could look for them on this particular schedule. The problem is that they don't include the name of the person. The only information that's included is the name of the slave owner and not the slave. All we get for the particular individual is their gender, their age, and their race. So it makes things very complicated for a genealogist to do this. So this is an example from 1860 from Bell County, Texas. Both columns here are enumerations. So it reads slightly differently than a population schedule. So the people that are included, the names that are here, those are the names of the slave owners. And then the people who are included here, just the name, just the not names, just the ages, the gender, and the race are included in those three columns. So that's all we're gonna get, for a particular individual, which is so incredibly sad. But at least it does give us something to look at when we're trying to figure out where your enslaved ancestor might have lived. So how do we use this to find our enslaved ancestor? So I'm just going to walk you through a quick example. So this is so Joseph Blair, sorry that he's all the way on the bottom here. So Joseph Blair is the person that we're looking for. He is 42 years old. No, he's 30. So he's 34 years old. He's a laborer. He was born in Texas, and he's included on this 1870 schedule with his wife, Mary. And what we need to keep in mind is many enslaved individuals, when they were emancipated, took the name of their slave holder. So in this case, we're going to just see if there's other Blairs that are living in the same area that might have owned slaves in 1860. Because again, 1860 is and 1850 and 1860 are only done by the slave owner, not by the slave themselves. So here we are looking for Blair. We're looking in the 1860 census. We're looking for a Blair in Bell County, Texas. So when we do that search, we find one guy named John Blair. John Blair owns many individuals. If we go to the record itself, because we always want to go first to the transcription, because it makes things easier, let's be honest. Look what we have. We have a male who's aged 24. So in 1870, he would be 34. So we have a Blair living in the right place at the right time. But let's look at the original. So we see John Blair here, and then we have a male 24 listed here. So this is a very good candidate for our person. So this is where we're going to start the search. But this is not the only place, we don't want to stop, because we're really just guessing. This is a big guess. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that will point us in this direction, but we want to corroborate this with some more information. So we want to look for some other information, which I'll go over once I go over where all these schedules are. So the yellow are what's available online. Almost everything for the slave schedules is available online and searchable. And it's all of those yellow states. So as I was saying before, the other things to look for. So you find them on the 1860 schedule. What do you need to do next? Well, you got to find them on that next slave schedule, so that 1850 schedule. You need to see if everything's still matching up. You can look at subsequent population schedules. You can look for vital records. If you want to place them with the slaveholder, you can look at probate records, especially their inventory, because that might give the first name of the individual. You can also look for newspapers and obituaries. All right, so our last census to look at is the social statistics. And this is the one census that is not going to have people's names, well, other than the slave schedule, that's not going to have people's names in it. It's taken in 1850, 1860, and 1870. And the lovely part about this schedule is that it gives you so much information about the place that your ancestor is living. We know about property values, the schools and the universities that are in the area, the libraries, the newspapers that are in circulation. If there's poorhouses, there's employment statistics, which is giving the average wage for laborers in the area. So it's not the national average wage, it's the average wage for the county or the town where your ancestor is living. There's a pretty good swath of them that are online, so you can see that in the blue there. So those are available online, but as I was saying before, many of these schedules are available on the local level, and you should contact your local library or archive to find out if they're available there. And what are the other records to be found? So not only does this put your ancestors in their historic context, which is so hard to do from time to time. So this is such a great way of doing that. But also it can lead to employment records, maybe city directories. You might find that your ancestors included on land records, like deeds or grants, as well as institutional records. Okay, so as a review, I know we went over a lot. So we did non-population schedules. We did agricultural, we did defective, dependent, and delinquent classes. We did the industry and manufacturing schedules, mortality, the slave schedules, and social statistics. The two things that I want you to take away from this class is that not everything is searchable and it's not all online. You have to make sure that you're looking at those local repositories to find what you're looking for, because these are so fabulous. There's great information about your ancestor or your ancestor's neighbors and friends. The other thing too is if you find them on one of these schedules, then you can look for other discoveries. There's other records to find in addition to what you're looking at.
All right. Well, thank you, Lindsay, so much for that great overview of some of the non-population schedules. Let's pause here and take some questions. So just a few questions on kind of clarifying, going back and forth between the population schedule and the non-population schedules. So first of all, is it correct to say that if you have found someone in, say, a Schedule 2 or a schedule, one of the later non-population schedules, that individual should also appear in the population schedule?
Yes. Yes. There are going to be some exceptions for that. So if on the agricultural schedule, for example, the manager of the farm is included. The manager might live in a different place than the farm. Like if it's a large farm, they might live in the town over from there. So in that case, they might not be included on the population schedule for that exact town, but they should be included on a population schedule. The other would be the mortality schedule. In theory, they shouldn't be included on there, but they can be from time to time. So that might be another one that would be a little bit up in the air. But for the most part, if you find someone on one of those subsequent schedules, so anything not Schedule 1, you should be able to find them on the Schedule 1.
And then kind of going the other direction, so you find someone in the population schedule, it seemed from some of your examples, there were instances where there were columns for, was this person deaf, insane, what have you. There would be a tick mark, so that would be a clue to say, oh, I should look at a later schedule. I mean, what do those clues exist for all of the censuses that we've talked about within the population schedule, moving to the non-population schedules? And do they exist for, are you going to find such clues for each of the non-population schedules that we discussed?
Yeah, yes. You should find, if you find someone on a population schedule who, in some census years, they're going to value the property. So they'll say, like in 1860, they value on the population schedule, they value the property, both real and personal estate, I believe. In that case, if that number's over $500, then I would say, now we should start looking to see if there's a manufacturing schedule for them or a farm schedule, because especially if they're just called like a laborer or something like that, because they might have, they might have a farm that would be included. The same would be true for, I believe 1870 is the schedule or 1880 is the schedule where they're asking if someone in the household is sick or if they have an ailment, something to that effect. Because I know my ancestor on that schedule said like they had the flu. So if they had the flu, they're not going to be on one of the, the 3D schedules. They're just sick for that particular day. But if there's something that's included on there that says, that the person is suffering from, mental health issues or something to that effect, then that can be a clue for you to say, okay, I should be looking in the 3D schedule to find, that individual. And it's, I would say that you really should tear apart that first population schedule and make sure you're looking at every single, tick mark and whatnot to give you, give you some fodder so that you can say, I should be looking at these subsequent schedules.
But, and also to your point, and, browsing is encouraged.
Right. So there might be nothing on that population schedule that gives you any indication that they should be included on some subsequent schedule. I say you should I would look at all of them. Especially if your ancestor is included on a population schedule where that data is like widely available. So it's like easily findable online. It's not like you have to trek down to not that trekking down to the local historical society isn't wonderful. But, you could just quickly see, page forward and find out to see if your ancestor's included. But really the other thing to think about is that it might not be your person that you're looking for, but it might be someone that they're associated with. Whether it's a family member or a cousin or someone that they work with, which might give you more information about your people down the road. So always encouraged to browse.
All right. Now, Andrew says blank forms are available for kind of easy extraction of data from the population schedules. Do you know if similar blank forms exist for the non-population schedules that we went over today? Especially, he notes that the farm schedule has so many questions. It would be great to kind of have a blank form and be able to kind of collect that information. Do those blank forms exist?
So I know that they are, those blank forms are in William Dollarhide's book, which is it's called the Census Book. At the back of that book, there's schedules that you can complete. I would also check, and I don't know if this is true, but I would check to see if Ancestry has them. So usually Ancestry, when you're searching on a particular schedule, it will give you the option on the right side to look at a transcription, look at a blank transcription. So in that case, it might be available. I'm not sure about Ancestry, but I know for sure that the blank schedules are in the Census Book by William Dollarhide.
All right, and maybe just a few more questions. Let's see. So can you explain again how to find the mortality schedule? And you said that one in particular has been digitized and pretty widely and posted online. So again, I mean, would you have to kind of browse or page forward to the mortality schedule? Or in that case, would they be indexed? So if you do a search, that person is likely to show up in the mortality schedule as a result.
So the mortality schedule is so what I included on the map there is of images that are available. There's also a collection on Ancestry that is an index to the mortality schedule. So it's not the real thing. You can't look at it. It's just the index. So in that case, they're fairly well done, from what I can tell. They've been indexed. They were one of the first non-population schedules to be indexed because there's people's names on them, right? That being said, I don't trust a computer to search anything for me. I've been in so many situations where I know someone should be on a census and I cannot find them. And there's a few reasons why that might happen. One, the person the currently living person who is looking at the schedule, who makes the index, they might have misread what is included on the enumeration, because it's a live person who's looking at the handwriting and saying, like, that says Jones. So that's one problem that can occur, is that individual makes a mistake. The other problem that can occur is that the enumerator doesn't understand what the person is saying to them. And they're not asking for anyone to spell stuff. And they have terrible handwriting. So there's a few things that might happen where it gets, really jumbled and garbled. So we have to be aware of that as well. So even though something has been made, has been indexed and transcribed and made available and searchable, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the result that you're looking for. So I would always say it's not going to be that much, unless they live in New York City, and then it's a little more difficult. But, for the most part, the mortality schedules are not that long. So if you think your ancestor died within that period of time, I mean, it's a narrow window. It's 12 months from that previous census year to the year that they're taking the census. If you think they died within that period of time, I would spend time looking to see, if they're included in there, and I would browse to see if they're included, because I just don't trust that you're going to get what you're looking for.
All right, just a few more questions. I know that we're over time. Gary asks, so how do you find the social statistics schedules since there are no names to search?
So those are made browsable. So the chart that I gave of the states that are available, that are online, if you go to, so for example, on Ancestry, the title of that particular collection is that the one that I gave previously, it's very long, but it's 1850 to 1880. It's the non-population schedules of the United States, 1850 to 1880. On the right-hand side, there's some drop-down menus. So you can choose the location, you can choose the type of schedule that you want to look for. So the drop-down will have like industry, agriculture, or social statistics. And if you pick social statistics, it will then ask you to break that down even further. So, what county are you looking for, what town? So once you click on that, it will bring up the whole collection, and then you can just page forward. So it'll be, I don't know, 5 to 10, 12 pages long. And you can kind of zoom in and out based on, there's a lot of information included on there, so you usually have to zoom in to see what you're looking at.
Now we have several questions about kind of the timing of these non-population schedules, and also, the fact that all of these seem to exist for the 19th century. We really haven't talked about anything existing past, 1880, 1890. I know at the start you said that there was a business schedule that we didn't talk about that was taken for 1935. But can you talk a little bit about why, do these schedules exist for the early 20th century and we just don't have access to them? Or, why were they maybe only taken during this time period?
So the very sad answer is they were taken. They were taken into the 20th century. As with most of the censuses that were recorded during that period of time, the originals were destroyed. So in the 20th century, if there was an agricultural schedule or an industry schedule taken, they were culled for the information, because again, the reason that we're doing these censuses is to help the government with policy and government programs. So they're culled for all that information, and once all that data is extracted, then they did not keep them. The same thing happened with the 1930 and I believe 1940. I think it's most of the early 20th century censuses that have been digitized and microfilmed. I believe that they destroyed all of them because their argument was, well, we have them on microfilm, so we don't need them anymore. So I think what ended up happening with those special censuses is that they kind of went in the same direction. So they were taken. You can find statistics on industry, manufacturing, agriculture, all those social statistics. You can find them, generally speaking, for the 20th century, but the actual censuses are not available, other than that 1935 business schedule that I mentioned at the beginning and that 1890 veteran schedule. But the ones that we were chatting about today, those 6 that we chatted about today, this is what we got.
And when you say they were kind of culled for information and statistical data, you mean it was kind of compiled and aggregated. It wasn't, you're not going to find John Smith listed in those statistics, right. So you're not going to find the individual's names. What a shame. What an action. All right. Well, on that depressing note, well, thank you again, Lindsay, for all of this information, for staying after a little bit and answering some questions. If we didn't get to your question today, certainly you can schedule a consultation with a genealogist to get more hands-on help with your research. You can consider hiring our research services team if you've hit a brick wall and you want us to do research on your behalf. And I do want to also tell you about a new and recently expanded service that's free, open to the public. It's available on our website at americanancestors.org/chat. You can chat with a genealogist from Monday through Saturday. So we recently expanded to include Saturday, and that's 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you go to americanancestors.org/chat, between those hours, 9 to 5 Eastern Time, Monday through Saturday, and you have a quick reference question or, how to navigate our website or anything like that, you can type a question in there and one of our genealogists will be able to help you. All right, so thank you again for joining us. As you leave the event, you'll have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback as we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings. Any and all feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. This free webinar was made possible by the generous support of members and friends around the world. Please consider making a gift to American ancestors to keep these programs free and to create more free programs for you and others. If you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs, please visit our online learning center, americanancestors.org/education. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.